I'm Nicola Tallant, and you can listen to my brand new podcast, Beast, The Murder of Nora Sheehan, streaming now, wherever you get your podcasts. The first gangland shooting of the year, which by November is a good thing, at least one thing that, but nonetheless, another 23-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a function of our age, but when you see the picture of Brandon Ledwidge, who was the young man shot dead, you know, he really does look. Maybe it's just us getting older, but he looks really, really
young. He's baby faced. Yeah, he's like a child, really, or just, you know.
And you know, not much beyond a child, really.
Yeah.
But it's a young man who's lost his life. We're recording on Tuesday today. He was due up in court on drugs charges. He was due to come into court. But again, these are drugs charges that are of a relatively small
district court level.
Well, they're district court levels, and they are possession of cocaine and possession of diamorphine, which is the sort of name used for heroin, for sale and supply. But you're not talking thousands, or you're not talking millions of pounds worth of drugs. So that's maybe a summation of where.
Do we know if he had any previous convictions?
Certainly not anything significant.
No.
And you know, but there's no doubt he was in or around these drug gangs in the area.
Yeah.
But he's a young man who's lost his life, and no matter that level of criminality, he's only suspected of it there. He's not being convicted of it.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't warrant somebody being shot dead in front of his family in his own front garden at his own front door. So
the story broke on Saturday evening, 7:00ish. I think this happened. And initially it was thought that his mother was in Benamedina and was on her way home from a holiday or something. But it since emerged that the mother was actually in the house and probably witnessed it, or certainly the immediate aftermath of it.
Yeah, it seems she witnessed the aftermath, and it's, you know, you can only imagine the trauma of that. It was a targeted hit. It wasn't they shot him knowing who he was.
So what happened? Did he open the door and was shot at the doorway, or did he walk into the garden?
Well, I think it's somewhere between the doorway and the garden.
Right.
And he was shot. I think
well, of course, he could have tried to run if he saw somebody with a gun and tried to run towards the garden or whatever.
He could have, but I mean, it's certainly they were aiming for him. He was killed as a result of it, and obviously nobody's been arrested at this point, but the guards are following a definite line of inquiry. It is the initial line of inquiry is that he had been involved in a dispute with a local drug dealer, and that this may have resulted in him being shot dead in front of his family.
So where, or do we know, did Brandon Ledwidge sit within the kind of the Gucci gang, which is the most familiar gang within the Finglas area? Was he sort of on the outskirts of that? Was he friendly with any of that gang? Or has it anything to do with them and their sort of ongoing feud in the area?
I don't think it does have anything to do with that. I think it's a personal dispute with a criminal who be slightly older than him, a man who has served prison sentences in the past. There's no doubt, obviously, that Brandon Ledwidge was suspected of involvement in the drugs trade. Obviously, there's been an ongoing feud in the area between what we call the flashy gang and the anti-flashy gang. However, both of those factions are probably not as powerful as they once were. Certainly the flashy gang has been diminished. So there are other outfits operating in the area. There's kind of localized gangs, and it's suspected that the hit was carried out by a member of one of those localized gangs. Brandon Ledwidge sits somewhere it's straight away, it's reported he was known to Gardaí. It's always, people hate that phrase.
They do.
And you can see why, because there's an implication.
There is, absolutely, yeah.
There's an implication without maybe, it's not qualified and nobody is standing behind it. he obviously was known to Gardaí in that he was facing charges.
So I was going to say to you that he was facing court. He certainly, we don't know, has he got previous convictions? And
well, I mean,
that's what it sounds like when someone's known to Gardaí. You think that.
Well, he doesn't have wild or serious convictions. He may have been facing obstruction in terms of an arrest charge as well, which again is a relatively minor charge. However, he was suspected of involvement in the local drugs trade. But ultimately, this guy was just barely out of his teenage years, had been a talented footballer, was a popular guy in the area, was well loved by his family. You see some of the tributes, which are really, really heartbreaking. And it's
there's a grandmother, there's an aunt, there's a mother at the very least in his immediate family, because we've seen tributes from them.
Yeah.
So he obviously has, quite a strong family unit around him.
Strong family unit, many friends, and it is a tragedy. I mean, this is a young man who's sucked into this lifestyle. I think some of the family have taken exception to the description of it as a gangland murder,
right?
Suggesting that it was a targeted hit as a result of a dispute, maybe with a local drug dealer.
Yeah,
and that's a fair perspective, I suppose.
I mean, there is a person of interest who would be a local man who would have known him, shall we say.
Yes.
That's just one person of interest in the inquiry. I don't think that has upgraded to a suspect as such yet in the inquiry.
No, that is the line of inquiry, a person in the local area. I mean, this is all very much...
this is the thing, in a way, you do jump to conclusions. A young man of 23 is killed, shot dead in Finglas. You immediately think this has to be part of feuding gangs, and, you can almost tell he tried to go out on his own. He was part of this outfit. He tried to go out on his own. It's like a kind of a mantra nearly.
Yeah.
And in many cases it can be true. But I suppose in a case where it isn't, or it possibly isn't, that this could be just a kind of a, one person against another, it must be very upsetting for the family then to find themselves in headlines like that.
Look, of course, the most upsetting thing is that they've lost their son or their brother or whatever. But of course, it's they may view it differently, and they are entitled to. There's no doubt that the chief line of inquiry as a person is focusing on a local criminal who has served prison time before, But it's either way, like it's a very brutal. Murder.
Oh, it is. I mean, Brandon Ledwidge isn't on gym forms. He's not somebody who's been warned his life is under threat. He clearly answers the door because he's comfortable enough to do that, which is a normal thing in any of our lives. And he's shot dead, and his mother's in the house. I mean, it is horrific.
It is horrific. And if somebody has lost their life over a dispute or words thrown around, or even if it's over a relatively small amount of drugs, it's an horrific act to take. To gun a young man down like that and to take away any chance he has of a future life. It's been a long time, I suppose. I remember, and you'll remember as well, over the last decade, we work on Saturdays, obviously, for the Sunday World to go to print on Sunday, and it was a regular occurrence for people to be shot either on Friday or Saturday night. They were the nights people were most likely to be killed. That has all kind of dropped off in the last couple of years. They've been few and far between. Gangland murders, where they were averaging something around 20 a year at one point, gangland gun murders, they're way down. And it is shocking as a result. And, that
I think this year has been very unusual. It's been pointed out already. Unfortunately, just a couple of weeks before Brandon Ledwidge was killed, how unusual it was as regards gun crime.
Yeah.
And I mean sort of gun crime outside of maybe familicides or that kind of thing, which we do see more and more of as well, unfortunately. But these kind of, I suppose, targeted at young men who are either members of gangs or who are living in areas where there is gang activity. There has been zero up until this. I mean, it has been quite an amazing year.
Absolutely.
Now, there's been the quelling, obviously, of a number of feuds, and there's been, I mean, you have to hand it to the policing of some of those feuds that, there hasn't been murders. There's been, no doubt, plenty of attempted murders.
But of course, the other bit of it is the dismantling of the Kinahan cartel.
Yeah.
While not all of those murders, those 20 murders a year, were being ordered from the head of that operation, nearly all the murders could be traced back one way or another to the organisation in terms of even just the availability of weapons,
or the sanctioning of hits,
or the sanction
between other groupings,
exactly, or even just the promotion of one group over another into power.
Yeah,
so the dismantling of the Kinahan cartel has had a trickle down effect, and there was a time working in the Sunday World where those kind of shootings on the weekends were just so regular.
Yeah.
And it's been a while, and your heart goes out to the family who I'm sure are grieving.
I get the impression that there is a good chance of this crime possibly being solved, or certainly someone being brought before the courts, like in an awful lot of shootings which are pre-planned. There's getaway cars, there's a plan in place to burn those getaway cars, to hide the guns, etc. There's a very low chance of really Gardaí solving them, because they're relying on eyewitnesses to come forward with stuff, whereas in this case there doesn't appear to be a getaway vehicle. The killer appears to have left the scene on foot. And it seems to be, certainly from the early investigation, it looks as if it is a slightly disorganised, chaotic decision, possibly spurred by anger.
Possibly spurred by anger and a personal grievance as much as anything else. So look, I mean, it's these things can be the absence of CCTV, of course, will be, if their CCTV is there or if it's not there, it's proven to be really key to solving these murders in recent times. We've seen it on a higher level. However, as you go out into, parts of Finglas, wouldn't be as heavily covered in CCTV, obviously, as a city centre location, that's for sure. So, I mean, it's I suppose us as our advancing years, but you look at those pictures and you just think, God, at the age of 23, whatever he was mixed up in, he had plenty of life to get.
What's the value of, a Rolex watch on your arm if you're going to be killed in it?
True, but he had plenty of time to come to realise that and to move on and to do things with his life, and there's ripples of effects of each one of these gun murders, we've seen that again and again, and
for generations
you'll talk to people 20, 30 years whose kids have been affected, and it just goes on, and it's obviously going to cause a very tense situation, that part of Finglas, as it is it does appear to be a localised dispute.
Okay, now we'll come back to it later in the week.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a million. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.